Welcome to the studio at African Utility Week in POWERGEN Africa. Today we're joined by Ben Gardner from the Northeast Group in Washington. Ben's going to share some of his analysis from the show. Welcome, Ben.
Hi, nice to be here, Ross. Thank you.
What are some of the observations you've picked up from the show?
Sure. Well, I think there are probably three big observations I've had from the show. The first would be around continued progress with regards to electrification across sub-Saharan Africa. Probably the second observation I've had is around prepaid metering, which is already at a high penetration rate in Africa, but is even growing more from here. And then I'd say my last observation is probably around just the reality that there are still some very significant challenges facing the African power sector.
Electrification.
Sure. Yeah, so electrification, I think, so this includes both off-grid resources and also on-grid or new connections. I think that there's a widespread narrative around the potential for off-grid resources, and we do indeed see great potential there. But I think that kind of fails to take into account the fact that this counter-narrative of the reality is really there's going to be the real growth will be in on-grid connections, so traditional T&D investment. If you look at, for example, the Power Africa initiative, I was at a talk yesterday in the conference about that, and they're looking to add 60 million new connections by 2030. So if you break that down, that's more than 5 million connections per year, which is very ambitious and a huge deal. I think even if they accomplish half that, it will be a very successful program. So I think that that and other electrification initiatives will mean that there is going to be quite a significant amount of investment in traditional T&D or transmission and distribution and metering, which leads me to my second point about prepaid metering.
You had some interesting statistics around those prepaid meters.
Yes, yeah, I did. So we did a study a couple years ago that dug into the prepaid market across sub-Saharan Africa. And we found that there was about a 42% penetration rate of prepaid metering. And that was 2 years ago. By all intents and purposes, from some of the conversations I've had at the show this year and some of the projects we've been tracking, that number has even grown significantly since then. You have some of the leading markets for prepaid are Zambia, Mozambique, and Botswana, all of which have a prepaid percentage above 80%, so nearly all of their customers are prepaid. There's a current project activity, prepaid projects in countries as diverse as Togo to Egypt and sort of everywhere in between. And I think that one shouldn't forget that prepaid you can also do through AMI, or advanced metering infrastructure, two-way communicating smart meters. So we're seeing growth in AMI in countries like Nigeria, Ghana, Egypt, a host of others. There's actually a large AMI tender that's out now from Eskom here in South Africa. Some of the people I talked with at the show may be a little skeptical about this tender, but I think that at a minimum it shows that Eskom is well informed about the benefits of AMI and looking to it in the future.
What are some of those challenges you've been having conversations about?
Yeah, so I mean, let's be frank. Challenges for the African power sector are widespread. They include things like high loss rates. They include financially unsustainable utilities. They include even politics getting in the way of things. I think if you look at just looking at T&D losses, for example, looking at both technical and non-technical losses, we actually dug into this issue a bit. And if you look at a lot of the international statistics agencies, they'll tell you that T&D losses across sub-Saharan Africa are about 15%. When we actually looked at it and we went country by country to primary sources and really vetted those sources, we found that it's likely double that. So it's probably closer to about 30% T&D losses. So, which is astronomical. These losses are also leading to my second challenge about financially unsustainable utilities. So utilities are failing to collect revenue. As a result of failing to collect revenue, they lack funds for maintenance of their grids. When you fail to maintain your grid, obviously reliability suffers. You have brownouts, blackouts, and the whole mess. I know you guys are quite familiar with that here in South Africa. And then my last point is just around politics. Politics can run the spectrum of local content requirements. So we talked about this Eskom AMI tender. That tender includes a 50% local content requirement, which is sort of dissuades some of the international vendors from participating in the project. It's difficult for them. And then, the far end of the spectrum, obviously, unfortunately, corruption is still a very significant political risk here in Africa.
Very interesting insights. Thanks, Ben.
Thank you, Ross.
Be sure to subscribe to our channels for more industry-related content. Thanks for joining.